Hey Miraculous fans, Kristal here, and today I'm going to be talking about characters whose names are often misspelled or mispronounced. And no, I'm not talking about times when it happens within the show itself. Actually, it doesn't happen much in the actual show. The only examples I can think of is like when Chloe's mum kept calling her the wrong name.
Clara, Chloe, what is this? Kylie, Chloe, don't be ridiculous, casserole. Chloe.
Or when Chloe always got the butler's name wrong.
Jean-Jacques, Jean-Luc, Jean-Claude, Jean-Marc, Jean-Jacques.
And those were intentional writing. And I'm not here to talk about errors like that time when Muller was accidentally called Topo.
Mullo, get squeaky! Topo, trips, unify!
No, instead I'm going to be talking about characters whose names the fans often get wrong, either not knowing the spelling or pronunciation. Now, when it comes to pronunciations, you'd think people wouldn't get it wrong if they just watched the show, because the right answer is there in the show when characters say it. But it still happens. And there's even ones on this list that even I'm guilty of having gotten wrong before, just misremembering it, I guess. As for spelling, that's even more understandable to get wrong, because you hear their names in the show, but it's not as if you see their names spelled out on screen, and unless you watch with subtitles, or unless you're reading stuff online. So you could easily get it wrong. And even if you do read something online, you might read something that's not an official source and someone who wrote it also got it wrong. That being said, there are actually quite a few of these characters I want to mention, so let's get into it. But before I get into the main ones, I just want to bring up the category of characters with accented letters in their names, because it's sort of a misspelling to leave those out, but it's sort of not. Now, most of what I talk about in this video applies to English speakers, since that's what I am, and that's what I mainly engage with online, unless I happen to come across a post and it conveniently has a translate button. But anyway, the thing is, English speakers aren't as used to seeing accented letters as other languages. We have a few English words like fiancé or cafe or cliché. It usually happens with words that were taken from other languages, but they're considered real English words. These words officially have accented letters, but we often see them without the accent bit, and we can still read it and know what it is, even though it's officially correct with the accent. A lot of times when people type them without the accent, it's because they don't even know how to type it on their keyboard, or if they do know how, they can't be bothered going out of their way to do it. Getting to the point, there are a bunch of Miraculous characters whose names have accented letters in them. I won't go through them all, but some examples are Milan or Andre. Also, side note, did anyone notice they used the name Andre twice? There's Chloe's dad and Andre the Ice Cream Man. Plus there's Chloe, who, according to some sources, is officially spelt with an accented E. And apparently Felix's mum Amelie has an accented E, which I myself didn't even know until I happened to see it while I was looking up other stuff to check things for this video. And there are a few examples that have them in their surname, like Alia Césaire, Aurore Boreal, and Max Cante. And Kim's surname, which I'm not even going to try pronouncing because I don't want to possibly butcher it, and just look at those accented letters on screen. I'm not going to try, I'm sorry. Now, instead of giving all of these characters an entry on the list as being commonly misspelled, I decided to just make this one statement saying that when it comes to accented letters, it's not as bad to forget about them and spell it with the regular version of the letter. The accented version might be technically officially correct, but it doesn't really matter as much. It's nice to have it look official, but I don't think anyone really cares too much. It doesn't look too wrong. Moving on, let's get on to my list of characters whose names the fans often can't get right. Starting off with a main character, we have Adrien, who goes in the misspelled category. It's one that the fans can't seem to agree on. And it's not, when I say they can't agree, it's not that they fight over it or actively debate it. It's just that I see different people using two different spellings, although they don't go out of their way to correct each other. It's just we see the different spellings. Now, this is an easy one to get mixed up because there are two common ways to spell the name Adrien, with an E or an A before the N. But according to the sources I've seen, the official answer for this character seems to be Adrien with an E. Next, we have one that's pretty easy to misspell because it's not commonly spelt that way, at least not by English speakers, and that is Alix. Her name is spelt with an I, but a lot of fans who watch the show and they just hear the name, they think it's the typical name Alix, which it usually has an E. Understandable mistake, but still wrong. And speaking of Alix, another name people often get wrong spelling-wise is her hero name, Bunnyx. A lot of people aren't sure whether it's spelt with an I or a Y. And even I wasn't sure for the longest time. I had no idea which one was right. And so I've used both at different times. But from what I checked now to make sure I've got it right, it is Bunnyx with a Y. But I've seen people use either way. Now, another name Alix has had is when she briefly used the dog Miraculous. And I remember I've actually misremembered how to pronounce that name in the past. Seeing it written, I mistakenly read it as Canigirl, which still makes sense symbolically in terms of name origin, because if we're going for something like the Latin word for dogs, it would be like canis or something. But they did it as Canigirl, like canine. Next, we have one that's not as commonly seen, but I feel like it's one that's easy to misspell if you know how to pronounce it, or easy to mispronounce if you're seeing it spelt out, which is Miss Bustier. I've seen it mispronounced before, and that can happen when you're seeing it spelt out, because if you're used to English words, it looks like it would phonetically be read as Bustier, and I've also seen it misspelled, which usually happens when someone has heard it in the show, but they're not sure how that would be spelled. But this example is just a case of English speakers sometimes getting tripped up by French spellings.
Miss Bustier, please!
As for her Akuma name, I will admit a dumb mispronunciation I made a while back when I hadn't watched the episode yet. And I had not heard the characters say it, but I read the title, and I read it as Zombizou, because the Z-O-U kind of looks like it could be said as Zhao. It's understandable given the spelling, but once you watch the episode, you hear it and you know it's Zombizou.
Zombizou.
Speaking of Miss Bustier, another character whose name is easy to get wrong is her partner, whose name is Gisèle. Now, I've seen people spell her name with a double L, which is understandable since that's a common way of spelling that name, but according to the wiki, it's Gisèle with just one L. That's probably the French way. And there is an accented E too, but we already went over that. And since we're talking about them, their baby's name is Harmonie, which is often spelt with a Y, but according to the wiki, this Harmonie is spelt with an IE. Next up, we have one that I myself have messed up in the past, so I wouldn't be surprised if others have made the same mistake, and it is Nathaniel's hero name. For a while, I pronounced it like Caprikid, but upon rewatching, it turns out that he stresses the sounds differently and says it as Caprikid.
Caprikid!
I guess it's kind of like the star sign Capricorn. I don't know, but I definitely said Caprikid in the past, so You can laugh at me, yes. I put this entry on the list because, yeah, I mispronounced it. So this is one that people could get wrong if they were reading it. Next, we have one of our akumatized villains, and I often mistakenly read his name as Glaciator. Like, like, and I think I've heard others do the same. I think it happens because in my head I associate glace like with ice. I always thought that was some kind of symbolism there, especially with the Pokemon Glaceon. I hear glace, I think ice. But it is Glaciator, kind of like glass.
Glaciator.
Because it's French. And it more so comes from a French word which has been used to describe frozen edibles and in general is used as the generic word for ice cream. So, there you go. Now this next one isn't mispronounced too often by Miraculous fans, but I have seen it happen, and it's happened to me, is that some people might mispronounce Kagami, and the reason I bring it up is because I've seen it pronounced differently in other media, which could confuse people who have already watched a show with a character with the same name. For instance, I used to watch the anime Lucky Star, which has a main character named Kagami. Do you hear the difference? It's about which syllable you stress.
Kagami deいいんじゃないの?
I was just asking you what you thought I should do about Kagami.
But it's consistent within each show. So when I first watched Miraculous and Kagami was introduced, I noticed the difference, and I had to avoid pronouncing it the Lucky Star way. It took some getting used to. It's sort of like if you had a character in one show named Bianca, but a character in another show named Bianca. You have to remember the difference. Or another example is like how Back to the Future has Clara, but Doctor Who has Clara. It's sort of the same name, but sort of not, because you have to remember to pronounce it the right way for that character. So I got used to remembering that the Lucky Star character is Kagami, but the Miraculous character is Kagami. Now, for another misspelled one, here's another one that fans often don't agree on, even though they don't actively fight over it, like the Adrien example. And this time it's Luka, because again, the name can be spelled two different ways, so it's an easy mistake to make. People often spell it with a C or a K. But officially, it is Luka with a K. The easy way I learned to remember it is that it matches with Julika, which we know definitely is spelt with a K, not a C. This next one has a similar problem. I'll make it quick. The character Marc. He is spelt with a C, not a K. Again, easy mistake to make because it's commonly spelt the other way. Next, we have Master Fu's wife, Marianne. It's easy to get this spelt wrong because the name is pretty commonly spelt as Mary Ann with a Y and a space between them. But it's Marianne, one word, as you see on screen here. Next up, we have the main girl herself, Marinette. Now, I've seen her name misspelled a few times, but I'm willing to bet that at those times, the true culprit was autocorrect. Because when I first got into the show, I remember when I would try and type her name, and my devices would usually flag it as not a word, and they often try to correct it to Marionette with an O, like the style of puppets. Now this happens often because if your keyboard is set to think you speak English, it wouldn't be used to that name. So I'm willing to bet that most instances I see of it being wrong online was more from spell check software, but I thought I'd bring it up anyway. Also, I sometimes see her surname misspelled, not a lot, but it happens. Some people misspell the Cheng part as Chang with an A, but it's Cheng with an E. Next up, we have a very minor character, but still one that's often misspelled or mispronounced. Mireille. Now, I get that this one can be tricky if you're not familiar with French, because if you see it spelt out, you're expecting there to be an L sound, but it's Mireille.
Mireille Caquet!
And some people who know how it's pronounced from hearing it in the episode, they might not realize how to spell it, because then if they know it's Mireille, they're not expecting to have to put an L in there. So regardless, I don't blame you on this one, because look at that spelling, and it's Mireille. Now here's another quick one that some people don't know how to spell. The other teacher we see sometimes, Miss Mendeleiev. It's easy to get tripped up by the placement of the E's and the I's, but here it is on screen. Moving on, here's one who gets both their first and last name misspelled sometimes, which is Nadja Chamack. Again, her first name is a bit unusual from an English-speaking perspective, because we have the name Nadia, but not spelt like that usually. There's a J in there. It's one of those times where a J is sort of pronounced more like a Y in some languages. So it's Nadia, but there's a J. And I've seen some people misspell her last name a bit too, either with just a C or just a K, but there's both. Now here's a quick one, but a very common one I've seen misspelled, which is Nathalie. Nathalie has a TH. I'm sorry, it just does. It's French, okay? But I get it because we have the name Nathalie and it does not normally have the H. But that's just how it is officially. Now this next one is a pretty small mistake, but I wanted to mention Kitty Noir for spelling, as well as Lady Noir when Marinette used the cat Miraculous in Reflectol and Safari. Now we all know how to spell Cat Noir, but what some people don't realize is because it's French, the word actually has a different spelling when used in a feminine form. So while Cat Noir is spelt without an E, Kitty Noir and Lady Noir, as well as Bug Noir, like in the season 5 finale, they spell it with an E at the end because they use the feminine form. So any of you writing Kitty Noir without an E, that's technically wrong. Now, here comes the one that basically inspired me to make this video. It was after thinking about this character that I realized there were a bunch of characters' names that people get wrong, including this one, and then I ended up deciding to make this video. She's Kim's girlfriend who likes swimming and was akumatized as Siren. She doesn't appear much except for that one episode, but anyway, the reason I'm not saying her name yet is because I want to save the correct pronunciation for last. But you can see the spelling on screen. Now this is one that I actually got wrong myself for a while. Now, it is not Ondine, as I always pronounced it for a while. And it's not Ondine. And it's not Undine. She's not the Undertale character. For a while, I often said Ondine, because that's what I thought the spelling looked like. Just looking at the spelling, the first part looks like on, and the second part looks like dine, like dining in a restaurant. But if you check the episode Siren and find when Kim says it, you'll find the answer. It's
Ondine?
the first part is not on, it's un. And the second part isn't dine, it's deen. It's Ondine. Now, here's an Akuma name that I've seen a lot of people get wrong. It's Marinette's mum when she was akumatized. It's tricky because it starts with a Q. So most people think it's something like Qilin. The amount of times, like when I used to watch a lot of reaction videos, when people would read the episode title and they would get so tripped up by this one and they'd usually say Qilin. But it's Chinese, so that's what it's inspired by. So it's actually pronounced like a CH. Qilin.
Qilin.
Now, these next two are both surnames that I wanted to bring up that can easily be misread by someone unfamiliar with French spellings, so I just wanted to mention them quickly. We have Sabrina's surname, which has an X at the end, but it doesn't make an X sound. She says Raincomprix. It's prix, like a Grand Prix in racing, I guess. That has an X, but you don't pronounce the X. It's not Raincomprix. No, Raincomprix.
Sabrina Raincomprix.
As for the other one, it's Rosa's surname, because there's a T at the end, but you don't really pronounce the T. It's more like Lavillant.
Rose Lavillant.
Now I just wanted to quickly mention an Akuma villain that a lot of people read wrong, similar to Qilin, where they read the episode name and they've no idea how to say it. So this mainly happens before they watch the episode that they get it wrong, and then they're fine. But I've found it so funny when I've watched reaction channels do this episode. They read the name and they have no idea how to say it. And this one is Sapotis. Based on the spelling, they tend to say something like Sapotis. And that's how you can tell when someone hasn't actually seen the episode yet.
Who are the the Sapotis?
Now finally, here's one that I see mispronounced a lot due to the spelling, because it starts with an X. So some people think it's a Z sound, like xylophone, but it's not. And this is the monkey kwami. A lot of people will say Xuppu. It's not. It's Chinese, because the miracle box is Chinese. So this time, it's more like an SH sound. It's Xuppu.
My name's Xuppu, you nitwit!
Basically, it's like Xuppu. But with that done, before I end off finally, I'd just like to touch on one honourable mention of sorts. Because it's technically not a wrong spelling, but it sort of is. I want to talk about how people spell and pronounce Cat Noir. Now, the thing about a show being in multiple languages is that characters can have different official names in the different language dubs. This makes sense, especially when it's a hero name, which is derived from actual words, while a character's regular name is usually the same, aside from maybe being pronounced a bit differently due to accents. So that means these different names for different languages are all correct, because they're the official name for that language's dub. Now, the thing that often bugs me is when people are speaking or writing in one language, but using the name from a different language. And this happens a lot with Cat Noir. Now, we all know it's Chat Noir in the original French, with a CH. And that's all well and good, but as much as you want to honour the original, in the English dub, his name is officially Cat Noir. It's even in the name of the show. But then you see stuff like fan fiction, yes, I've looked at fan fiction, or those comic dub videos on YouTube, where they're written in English, but they spell and pronounce it as Chat Noir. Sure, we all know what you mean because it's close enough, but if you're speaking and writing in English, it just makes more sense to use the official English name. Now, I know you want to honor the original, but this kind of thing would be it's like if I was talking about Pokemon, but I said Team Rocket was Jesse, James, and Meowth, which is what Meowth is called in Japanese. I mean, it's the original name, right? But if I said Meowth, it'd feel a bit jarring. You'd expect me to call him Meowth, right? Because I'm speaking English. Look, I don't mean for this to come out wrong. I'm not saying we all need to speak English or anything. I'm just saying that to keep things consistent, if you're speaking one language about a show, you should probably use that language's official names. Otherwise it just looks weirdly inconsistent. But that's enough about that. What did you guys think? Were there any spellings or pronunciations that you've gotten wrong before? I hope this video was at least interesting and informative. I'm not judging anyone who got any of these wrong, because as I said, even I was guilty of some of the ones I mentioned here. But I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you next time for more Miraculous and other things as well. See you next time, guys.